We've all been programmed to say, oh, your strengths, they're fine, they're good the way they are, but why are you not performing at this? And so the one way to know your strengths is to ask yourself, what do you do that you feel the most confidence doing? And it could be something as simple as, I'm great at organizing birthday parties. It could be. Like, that may be your skill, right? That may be your strength. Or it may be something like, I'm really good at putting on makeup. It could be any of those things. And if you don't know it yet, you can also do an exercise where you sit down with a colleague, a family member, and a friend, because you need people from all areas of your life, and you ask them, what do you think I do that I excel in, that I stand out in? Or if you could trust me to do one thing in your life for you, what would that one thing be? You might be surprised by what they say. And that's such a powerful question to ask, because someone may actually say something like to you, like, Jay, I think your greatest strength is just knowing what to say to me when I most need it. And you may think, well, that's not a strength you can do anything with, but it is. It is a strength that you can do a lot with if you are okay with accepting that. Of course, I want someone to say to me, you're an athlete like Cristiano Ronaldo, and you could play football and get the Ballon d'Or and win all these trophies, but that's not my reality. And so I feel that that's the place that I would start with strengths.
Need motivation?
Watch a top 10 with Believe Nation.
Hey, it's Carmichael, and I make these videos because in my first business, I was making $300 a month. I quit on my business partner, and the thing that saved me was studying the stories of super successful entrepreneurs. So I hope that this story today helps give you the motivation you need, because I still need it too myself.
So today, let's learn from one of the best, Jay Shetty, and my take on his top 10 rules of success. Enjoy.
There was a great study done on the healthy, wealthy, and wisest people in the world. And they were asked, if you could invest in what you're good at, you're average at, or what you're bad at, where would you put your money? And so if you take 100%, how would you divide that as a ratio? And if you ask this, I want everyone who's listening and watching at home right now to do this exercise. And you may write down 33, 33, 33. You may write down 40, 40, 20. You may write down 10, 10, 80. Whatever you write down, the most healthy, wealthy, wisest, successful people on the planet will say theirs is 100, 0, 0 or 80, 10, 10. They go all in on their strengths because they know that if they go all in on their strengths, they can become exceptional at it. Now, here's the caveat. When it comes to your hard skills, focus on your strengths. But when it comes to your soft skills, focus on your weaknesses.
Now you got to tell me which is which.
Yeah, so hard skills are things like Excel, math, product design, using a video camera, script writing, speaking. These are all hard skills in the sense that they're very clearly defined, very tangible. You can really measure them. It's almost like a skill that's measurable. Your soft skills are like emotional intelligence, listening, compassion, empathy. These are all soft skills or considered soft skills. And those are where you focus on your weaknesses because they can actually end up tripping you up while you're trying to become the best at doing the hard skill. So you may be the best videographer in the world, but if you don't know how to listen to your community and your team, then no one's going to want to work with you. And so to me, that's the missing link, that we're actually the other way around. We put all our emphasis on getting better at our weaknesses and our hard skills, and we think that because we're empathetic and good people, that will be enough. And it doesn't work that way.
Rule number 2 is never wait to be ready.
I remember a piece of advice from Richard Branson. Now, he didn't give it to me personally, even though I like to think that he did. I may hear his voice in my head when I think it through, but he said this brilliant statement. He said that when you get an opportunity you think you're not ready for, say yes and then figure out how to do it. And I remember reading that when I was 18 years old, and I thought, wow, that's genius. I'm going to try that out. I'm going to experiment with that statement. Now, that statement's got me into a lot of trouble sometimes, but most of the time it's worked. Why? Because when I said yes to an opportunity I didn't feel I was ready for, I then had the incentive and the catalyst to go out there and study, learn, build, grow. Whereas when I waited to be ready for an opportunity, I never had the push to grow. Hence, going back to that place, we sometimes need to go back to feeling like we have nothing to then feel like we have an energy to go out and achieve something again. You've got to put yourself in that mindset. So actually what I'd say to that is, don't ever feel that you're not ready. Even if you are, say you are, and then go and learn how to do it. Don't let the opportunity pass. Now, in the case that you've already let it pass, don't worry. Just change your tack next time. It's as simple as that.
Rule number 3 is make an impact.
Impact is always greater than income. There is always more impact you can make. So I know that for me, what I'm trying to do with the work I'm doing is video was an entryway into a journey of transformation. I wanted people to move from videos, to listen to the podcast, to read the book, to come to events, to come to retreats with me in India. Like I want to help people go as far on their inner journey as they possibly can. That's my personal mission. Is if someone just wants to watch a 3-minute video and it makes them feel better, that's beautiful. But if someone one day wants to come with me to India and live the life I lived and have a deep inward journey, then I want to be able to facilitate that. I'm still building that bridge to people's deeper selves.
Yes.
And so the first thing that always humbles me and grounds me is I've got a lot of work to do.
Yeah.
There's so much suffering and pain in the world. There is so much unrest in the world. There is so much trauma in the world. So we've got a long way to go.
Yes.
So all the awards and the views, they give you confidence that you're going in the right direction, but you know you're far away from the destination. So that's one thing. I think the second thing that really helps me is being around, still spending time with my monk teachers who have very different vision as to what is valuable in life.
Yeah, because they don't care about material possessions or money and none of it.
They don't care. And so they're not impressed by that. And so to be around people who don't admire certain things helps you lose taste for it. It's kind of like when I'm
You're
around.
just a man.
Yeah,
like
exactly.
Rule number 4 is shift your perspective.
We all get into these scenarios in the world where we think we're trying our best to help and love other people. So I think majority of people feel like they give more than they get. And I think anyone who's an empath or feels like they care for others will feel, I give out so much love, but I don't get as much back. And that's how I felt sometimes in the ashram. Now, the interesting thing is that I'd forgotten lesson number 1 in the ashram. And the first lesson in the ashram was, this is a hospital. There are doctors and patients. But remember, the doctors are also patients. And sometimes the patients may teach the doctors. But remember that we're all in the same space, in this hospital, where everyone is going through a process of purification. So that was very clear. The ashram was not meant to be heaven. It wasn't meant to be this idyllic place where everyone was perfectly zen and calm. It was a place where you had to learn to develop that even amongst the challenges that were there, just like in reality. So I'd forgotten that, and I was going, well, I'm giving out lots of love and no one's giving me any love. And it was really emotional for me because I just felt like I was investing in people and helping people and supporting people. And I'll never forget that conversation. And even till this day, it's become one of those conversations that stays with me and I remind myself of regularly, hence I put it in the book. The monk said to me, he said, just as there are people that you love and don't love you back, there are people in your life that are investing in you and loving you that you've forgotten about. And it was one of those like stop moments of just, is that true? And I would encourage everyone who's listening and watching right now to really think about that. Think about that person you've been chasing, whether it's a friend, a potential boyfriend or girlfriend, a potential husband or wife, or whatever it may be, or job. And then ask yourself, has someone ever chased you in life? Or has someone ever pursued you in life? Or has someone ever tried to love you in life and you didn't even give them a time of day? The answer is true. I could agree with it. I can completely agree with that. There are people in my life who have done more for me than I could even begin to try and do. And that isn't just parents and family members. I'm talking about people professionally that I just can't repay. And so he spoke about it as a theme called the circle of love, that you will always get the love you give out, you will always get it back. Or whatever you give out, you will always get it back. You just won't get it back from the same people you give it to. And that was really fascinating to me because I also realized that I may have caused hurt to people and they may not have hurt me back, but I've received hurt from people that I never hurt. And so it works both ways, both with hurt and love. And when you see it on both ends, and that's ultimately karma in a tiny nutshell, it's completely grounding in saying, yeah, let me take a real look at my life and where those blind spots are about who I'm not being grateful to, who I'm missing, who I'm not expressing thanks to.
Also, to make sure you're actually taking action after watching this video, I've designed a special free worksheet just for this video. The worksheet will highlight all of the lessons learned in this video, as well as pull out our 3 favorite learnings and quotes that will inspire you to actually do something. The worksheet will also give you space to write down what your key takeaways are and your specific plan of action to make sure you're getting results. If you want the worksheet designed specifically for this video, absolutely for free, there's a link in the description below. Go click on it and start building the momentum in your life and your business. I'll see you there.
Rule number 5 is choose who to admire.
It's such a powerful question that should we admire people who are wealthy? And I think we have to be careful about what we admire, because what you admire will be what your actions aspire towards.
So and you'll start taking on those actions.
Correct. You'll start taking actions and behaviors and decisions towards what you admire. And so I would say that I've always admired people who had a purpose. That's what I admire deeply. When I meet someone, I'd say there's 2 things that I admire: purpose and humility. Like if I meet someone who has purpose, they're willing to sacrifice, they're willing to do whatever it takes, they are mission driven, they want to serve the world. It's why I was always a fan of yours from before we even met and we knew each other, because I was like, oh, here's a person who really wants to do good in the world. Here's a person who really wants to give. And so I think that's the first thing I look for. And then the second thing I deeply admire is someone who has humility, someone who I feel that they were really doing it from the goodness of their heart. So I think for me, my admiration has always been for those 2 things. And I don't think I can tell someone whether what they admire is right or wrong, but I would say that if you admire something, your actions are going to start dictating your journey in that direction.
Right.
And so you have to be careful what you admire, because that's what you're going to chase.
Right.
And so I would say that I like admiring purpose and humility because I think they are worthy of a pursuit.
Rule number 6 is create opportunities.
We've all heard the quote, good things come to those who wait. Maybe your father said it to you, maybe your mother said it to you, maybe your uncle or auntie or your friend, or maybe your teacher said it to you, right? Good things come to those who wait. I want you to tell me what you think of that quote. Has that principle worked for you? Has that in life made any difference, right? I want to hear your views. So in the comment section, just type away, let me know what you're thinking. Let me know what you think of that advice, that piece of advice, that good things come to those who wait. Because today we're talking about creating opportunities. So actually, I want to change that. My opinion on that quote is that we need to change that from good things come to those who wait to good things come to those who create. The people that actually create their own opportunities, the people that take responsibility and ownership to make a difference in their life and the lives of other people. And as we've been building this global conscious community, I know so many of you have stimulating ideas about how you're going to bring about change. We often think that creating opportunity means it has to be rushed or hurried, or it means you have to have lots of stuff going on. And sometimes that can get quite draining. It can get quite overwhelming. It can start to feel as if we don't know how we're going to move forward. But what I notice now is that we need to balance that theory with the value of creating opportunities. There's a great quote by a Roman philosopher named Seneca, where he said that luck is what happens when preparation meets opportunity, right? That's what happens when preparation meets opportunity, something that we don't really have a lot of talked about today. And I was thinking about, I used to have an economics teacher, and this economics teacher, I remember the first day he walked into school. He walked into school, I believe we had whiteboards by that time, I'm not that old. He had whiteboard, and on the whiteboard he wrote down, he goes, failing to prepare is preparing to fail. And I remember all of us just bursting out laughing, and we just thought, oh my God, is he a philosopher or an economics teacher, right? He wrote, failing to prepare is preparing to fail. He wrote that down on the board. And I'm thinking to myself, I'm going, oh my God, another one of these philosophers, because I wasn't even into philosophy myself. And when he wrote that down, now when I look back and I think, wow, that was such a powerful statement. That was so true. So Seneca, Roman philosopher, says the same thing. He says, luck is what happens when preparation meets opportunity. So one of the things I wanted to talk about, how do we create opportunity in our life? When we're trying to develop patience within ourselves, you'll find that when you're working to your purpose, when you're working in a connected way, when you're working in the direction where you feel focus, you naturally develop patience. We often feel we don't have patience when things aren't working out, and things usually don't work out when we're not working in a way that works for us. One of the things that I wanted to speak to you about, talking about that, is the ability to really understand times at which when we need to make things almost difficult again. Now, I don't want you to invite difficulties into your life. That's not what I'm recommending. But hear me out for a second. What I'm trying to say is that often you have to go back to feeling like you have nothing, so that you can create something again. A great example of this was actually Elon Musk, and I don't know how many of you have read his autobiography. It's absolutely phenomenal, biography. And he talked about that when he sold PayPal, his earnings were 180 million. Now he split that straight away. I think in a matter of about 3 months, he put 100 million into SpaceX, he put 70 million into Tesla, and he put 10 million into SolarCity. If you add that all up, if you're quick at maths, and you've probably done it already, that's 180 million already gone. Right? He said that he was struggling to pay rent, right? He had to borrow money to pay rent. The guy's a millionaire. Why did he do that? He says that he had to feel that desperation again, that ability to want to make a change. He had to relive that. You can create opportunity in your life. If you're someone who thinks maybe it's your business, maybe it's in your relationships, maybe it's at work, wherever it is, whether you're an entrepreneur, you're trying to grow your career, wherever you are, we all need to create opportunities. How can we do that? How do we all take that leap of faith? So you're somewhere, you're okay with where you're at. You're probably saying okay with where you're at, you're comfortable with it, but you know that there's more out there for you. How do you take that leap of faith? One of the ways that I believe we take that leap of faith is actually launch something new, then talk about it, rather than the other way around. Often what we do is we spend a lot of our time talking about doing something and we never get around to actually making it happen. But actually what I recommend is just start doing something small. I love talking about Facebook. When Facebook first launched, it was only meant to be for Harvard, right? Mark Zuckerberg made it, it worked for Harvard. It then branched out to the Ivy League universities in the States. It then branched out over to Cambridge and Oxford and the top universities and institutions in England. And then I believe across the world. But notice that it's a testing period. And you see loads of tech firms do this brilliantly today. They're experts at starting small and scaling up. So my main recommendation is start small. Do not try and start big, and really think about how you can launch something and then talk about it. Don't start talking about something first. Usually when you throw out an idea, if you get criticism for it straight away, you're less likely to see it through.
Rule number 7 is view failure as feedback.
I think one of my first things in failure is don't take it more personally than it actually is. And I'll give an example of that. When I was applying to 40 companies that all rejected me before an interview, all I was getting was an automated response saying your application will not go any further. I can't take that personally because they didn't meet me in person. They didn't have a interaction with me. They just saw my name. They saw I'd been a monk for 3 years. That resume is useless. I mean, what's your transferable skills? Like sitting in silence and stillness. Surprise, surprise, no one wants to hire a monk. And so they rejected you, but that's not personal because they didn't meet me in person.
But what if they had meeting you in person?
Right, so that's the first step. The first step is don't take all failure. I'll give you an example. Me and you, we reach out to countless guests to be on our podcast.
Who say no all the time.
Who say no all the time. But if I don't hear a no from the guest directly, that's not a no. Like someone's team can say no, someone's assistant can say no, someone's PR team can say no, but until they say no personally, it's not a no.
Okay, but when they do say no,
then that's a no. Yeah, so then let's move to that.
So how do you deal with that type of failure?
Yes, so if I deal with a failure where someone meets me in person and gets to know me.
No, Jay, you're horrible, you suck, like I don't want to deal with a monk ever in my life. I would never go on your show, I'm never listening to you, never. Then how do you deal with that type of failure?
So I've heard you say this, I've said it a couple of times and I'm sure it's been repeated a bunch of times around how I genuinely believe failure has feedback.
It's feedback,
and so for me, it's like failure has the ability to actually tell you what you need to improve. Now, not to improve to get their attention, improving to get the actions that you want to take.
The results you want.
The results you want. And don't make that result about the person who said no. Don't try use failure as a way to prove someone else wrong.
Because what happens when we prove others wrong?
When you prove others wrong, you end up trying to get validation and approval for them. And now if they're not impressed when you're right, you lose again. So you end up losing twice.
And you spend all this time and energy, years maybe, to prove someone wrong. I've been there many times. Yeah. And then you're like, I felt good for a moment. Yeah. And then I feel empty again.
Totally. And so that's the thing about failure in the second half is you have to see failure as an improvement. If I'm completely honest, everyone who rejected me in my life up until now has made me more hungry, taught me so much more about myself, and made me up my game.
Rule number 8 is ask interesting questions.
We don't ask people in our life interesting questions, and therefore we don't get interesting answers. If you ask the same boring, everyday questions to everyone in your life, you're simply going to receive the same answers as you did yesterday, last week, and even last year. This is something I learned on my podcast On Purpose. I get to sit down with some of the most fascinating minds in the world, but I've learned that I have to ask the right question in order to receive an answer that's going to help all of you that are listening. At the end of my podcast, I have this final 5 round where they have to answer the questions in either one word to one sentence. And almost every time I'll say, okay, ignore my rule, tell me how you really feel, because the answer is so fascinating. Now, I want to share with you some of the questions that I asked during that time that I think will benefit you when you're really getting into a conversation as well. If you met your younger self today, what would make them happy and what would make them sad? What situations make you feel awkward and why? This one's actually a great icebreaker because they might say this very moment. With some curiosity and humor, what did you recently buy that you now regret? I love that one. Some of my favorite ones that I ask on my podcast are, what's the best advice you've ever received? And what's the worst advice you've ever received? You'll be shocked by some of the answers that people share. And my ultimate favorite, if you could create one law that everyone in the world had to follow, what would it be? This is a question that has been shared for thousands and thousands of years, but it truly helps you understand someone's values.
Rule number 9 is be a connected thinker.
And one of the biggest mistakes we make in our communication with our teams and groups of people around us is that we assume we already know. Or we come up with a situation in the workplace which we've heard of before, and we assume it's exactly the same as before. When the truth is, human experience may be similar, but it's never the same for the person going through it. And so when we start thinking like children, when we look at things through fresh eyes, when we hear the same problem time and time and time again, but we're able to approach it and say, no, I'm going to be more present, I'm going to be more conscious, I'm going to be more empathetic, and I'm really going to listen in to what this truly is, what the challenge truly is. That's when we accept childlike thinking, not childish, childlike. And when you listen to people around you, how can you bring that same perception and say, I know I feel like I've heard this before, I know I think I know the answer already, but I'm still going to listen because there still may be something more for me to understand. What status quo can you challenge that will make you better, more effective, more productive and creative? How many times do we say that to ourselves? This is just the way it is. We just accept it. The way we're communicating, the way we're communicated to, the way we're thinking, the way people are thinking about us. Where can we start? Again, as a team, as a community, applying that same mindset to shifting things. We will never be able to solve the toughest problems inside our organizations, inside our teams, when we don't adopt community thinking, when we don't realize that someone from another industry, from another area, from another space could inspire us, when we don't realize that if we're not working together, if we're not thinking win-win, it's really hard to shift things. Is that really the best way we can do it? Are we really going to accept the status quo? Are we really going to say we need that critical thinking, but we need to do it together, not to each other, but together? Often critical thinking happens to each other. That person's not getting it right. How can we all critically think together as a community? I would encourage all of you to think about what you do on a daily basis and redefine it, redescribe it. Come up with your own vocabulary to talk about the incredible work you do. Because the more meaningful you think it is, the more meaningful your team will think it is, and the better your well-being, the better your mental health, the better your own communication, the better your ability to deal with stress and pain. And so when we can explain what we do meaningfully, when we can give it that vocabulary, when we can have the community mindset for the people we work with and the people who work with us, we can truly adopt what it means to be a connected thinker.
And rule number 10, the last one before some very special bonus clips, is seek love and beauty.
You have to seek the love and the beauty that you want in what you have now. Because that way you're training yourself to extract meaning right now, which means in the short term, if you can, like those hospital workers were doing, if you can fill that role with meaning and your true passion and what's coming from you, then that's going to lead you to discovering the power of it. And I saw that in my own life. When I came back from being a monk and I worked in the corporate world, I was teaching meditation and mindfulness and the things that I talk today in the corporate world. And I remember in 2014, I was invited by one of our executives to teach mindfulness to 1,000 of my peers at Twickenham Rugby Stadium. And I was speaking in between the CEO and Will Greenwood, who won the Rugby World Cup with England. And I'm sitting there in the audience as a complete nobody and completely around people who are my same age. We all make the same money. No one knows who I am. And there I'm sitting there going, how am I going to share mindfulness? But after doing that experience, I realized that even though my job was digital strategy and social media innovation, and I was a consultant, I was bringing my passion to the workplace, which actually gave me confidence that I could do this outside of the workplace. And that's how the two ideas connect. That when you find how you can apply it to your small world, you then get the confidence and the courage to take it out and make something real of it. Whereas I think a lot of us are waiting for that break to get into doing it in reality, but we actually haven't even tested it or experimented on it in a small space where we can develop our own confidence and courage around it. We can believe things at our core, but are we acting at them on our core, right? Are we acting on them? Are we actually taking action? Are we actually becoming activated and making change or trying to make change? When we are believing, making things happen, actually attract resources. So focusing on resources at the get-go isn't necessarily what you need. What we need to do is focus on the authenticity of what we're trying to achieve. Vani, we always have doubt whether our opinion matters or not, and sometimes we think that our social status might hinder us from making change. How do we overcome this? Vani, great point. Let's take a look at the case for Malala. Social change is different from business. In business, our social status matters. In business, our achievements matter. In business, our grades matter, right? But social change is about authenticity and genuineness and the true belief in a cause. If you look at anyone having massive change today in those spaces, they may be coming from business and making change. That's awesome, right? They've already established themselves in another industry and now they're bringing that to something that they care about. But if you look at grassroots level change in any area, it's coming from people who don't have degrees in that area, who don't have a background in that area, who haven't made money in that area, but they care about it. And that's why an authentic program of change, not just speaking about stuff, not just writing about stuff, but actually creating small groups of change, small pockets of change, activating individuals to start making a difference. That's something that everyone can connect with. That's something that attracts attention. So when you're doubting your opinion or whether your opinion matters, recognize you're probably right. Most of our opinions don't matter. Everyone has an opinion. If I share something about Standing Rock today, so many people around us will have an opinion. But the key is how many people are turning that opinion into action. So it's true, our opinion may not matter, but as soon as we start turning that opinion into genuine and authentic action, that will attract interest from the right people.
You talked about the fear of fear and how you had to learn to let go of your fear of fear. What does that actually mean, letting go of the fear of fear?
Yeah, so I talk about how we fear the wrong things.
What do we fear?
So most of us are fearful of how our friends are reacting, what's happening on social media, and what's the random bit of news that we heard. None of it is fact-based. That's one of the biggest issues that we have.
It's worry-based.
It's worry-based, and it's also imagination-based. So we become fiction writers. We've all watched too many movies. Now we start writing these beautiful movies in our head. Well, not beautiful, scary movies in our head of what may happen. So our imagination, and Seneca said it best, we suffer twice. One in reality and one in imagination, right? We suffer twice. And this is the
what
biggest...
actually happens to us,
Totally.
and then the story we continue to tell ourselves.
Totally. Now there's this incredible study in the book that I have to talk about. So
Tell
they
me.
took monks and they took non-monks, and they
competed against each other.
They competed against each other, literally. So they put this plate where you experience heat. And so what happens is the non-monks touch this plate. Now this plate heats up gradually, softly, and then at one point it gets really hot for 10 seconds and then it cools down. And so what happened is that when the non-monks touched it, the anxiety and pressure and stress in their brain just triggered straight away, even though it wasn't that hot.
It wasn't hot.
It was heating, but it wasn't hot to do anything major to you. But the anxiety and stress in imagination or in anticipation went through the roof in the non-monks. Now this is what's fascinating. When the monks touched it, they showed that it didn't feel anything as it rose, but as it got to its highest, they felt physical pain, but they showed no trigger of emotional pain because they did not assign any emotional element to that pain. So my point with that is, you can look at the news right now and you can get scared straight away and get in complete freeze mode, feeling stuck, paralyzed, whatever it is, because what you're now doing is you're creating a story of what's going to happen. And that story...
And you can cause sickness in yourself.
You can cause sickness
just by
inside
the story,
yourself.
not actually
the reality.
The facts of the disease hitting you or something happening physically to you.
Totally. And that story, again, can be used positively. So your story may actually be true. But if it's going to be true, now you can prepare. And that shifts you away from being scared because now you're preparing.
Yes.
And so the real
You can be confident because you prepared.
Exactly. And so we should be shifting our fear energy into preparation energy. Because what fear does is it keeps you locked there, right? We just feel stuck. I'll give you an example. Like when you were preparing for big games, when you used to play in the NFL, right? And you're playing American football against some of the biggest athletes in the world, it's like you can either sit there and be scared that you're going to play this game on the weekend, or you can prepare. And your confidence is in the preparation. So when people go, how do I feel confident right now? Are you preparing?
Are you putting the reps?
Are you putting the reps?
Yeah.
Are you building your immunity? Are you taking your vitamins? Are you
drinking lots of water?
Are you drinking lots of water? Are you taking the steps that are needed to prepare for whatever's coming? You will feel more confident that way. Just around 2 years ago, I had this idea. I wanted to share wisdom at a pace we wanted entertainment. I wanted to share wisdom in a way that it could connect, resonate, and deeply evolve the lives of people all over the world. For 10 years before that, I'd been working with individuals, groups, coaching at universities, companies, and all of these opportunities, but I really wanted to serve and connect with everyone across the world. I wanted to make wisdom accessible to anyone who had one of these.
I have one of those.
So I was excited, I had the energy, the enthusiasm, and I was pitching my idea to every single company that was online. Now remember, this is before I ever made a single video, before any of you knew who I was.
Who's this guy?
I applied to not 10, not 20, but 30 online media companies, hoping that one of them would like my series idea. I waited a day, I waited 2 days, I waited a week. I was rejected by every single one of those companies before interview. None of them invited me for a phone interview. None of them invited me for a video interview. None of them even connected with me in any personal way.
That's rude.
I said to myself, it doesn't matter. Let's see what else I can do to try and make my goal a reality.
What else you got?
So I tried to network with people who may be able to give me a chance. I got one answer and one answer only. They said, you're getting older now. Most of the people who want to break into this industry are around 21 years old. Just don't worry about it. Other people said to me, look, you need to go get a media and journalism degree or a master's and then we'll take you seriously. Literally, I was getting rejected from every single person I spoke to. But inside of me, I had this desire, I had this calling, I had this mission, I had this vision that I wanted to share everything that I had learned with people out there. I genuinely tried every single possible method I could to break into the media industry, to the point that the only thing that was left that I could try was to start a social media channel. And of course, you know the rest. The most incredible thing is that it reminds me of a really powerful thought from Thomas Edison. He once said, when you believe you've exhausted all options, remember this, you haven't. That thought stayed in my mind the whole time. What I learned from all of this rejection, from all of this failure, from all of these clear no's, was one really important thing. And today, I want to give that as a gift to you.
Me?
If you have a dream, you have an idea, you have a vision, we have to take the responsibility to prove our worth before we expect anyone to value our talent. When I started crafting and creating my own videos, teaching myself how to edit, learning how to produce, understanding the mechanics of social media, when I started putting my energy into that space, that's when people started to take notice. That's when people started to listen. That's when things started to happen.
This is nice.
It's when I decided to take the responsibility for sharing what I was passionate about with the world and not waiting for someone external to validate me or give me permission or allow me to do that. That's what made the difference. If you're feeling you've been going through a lot of rejections, ask yourself this: is your deeper passion and calling making you want to move further? Number 2, have you truly knocked on every single door? And number 3, are you working hard on investing in your expertise and passion so that you really have something impactful to offer? We will continue to create the life that we currently have with the current set of thoughts, wisdom, beliefs, and ideas that we have. And if we're happy on that path, if you could fast forward your life in 10, 20, 30 years' time, and you'd be satisfied with getting the life that you have right now, then that's great. But if, like the majority of people that I know and that I speak to and that I connect with online, the majority of us would look and go, no, I really want to change life. I want to be with my kids, but I want to change how I am with them. I want to be at work, but I want to be more present at work. I want to improve the quality of my life. Then I'd say that it's so important that we learn and open up our minds to alternative thoughts. I'll give you an example. There was this great study that MIT did on people's minds' openness and their ability to be creative and innovative. And they looked at 2 types of people. One person was surrounded by people who all knew the same people, right? Kind of like our normal lives. And the other person was surrounded by lots of people who didn't know each other. And they did the study around who is more creative, more innovative, and has a bigger impact in the workplace, in their professional life, and then a little bit into their personal life as well. And what they found was that those people who knew each other, who knew them back, lived in what was known as echo chambers. They were rarely exposed to ideas that improved their way of living or their professional performance. But people who were exposed to ideas that had no connection with other people in their life were able to be more creative, have better ideas, have more purpose, have more meaning in life. So often we've become closed in our little spaces around what we hear, what we know about, and we're not exposed to this new sense of ideas. And that's what I would encourage, is just approach it with a tiny bit of curiosity. That's all you need. The reason why people think you either have to be spiritual or financially successful is because they think, well, if you're going down the spiritual path, money can be a distraction. Or if you're going down money, then spirituality will distract you. And that is true. That is real. Like, you can get really materialistic trying to be spiritual.
Sure.
And you can become distracted from your materialism by being spiritual. That is true, but the goal of life is to live in that paradox, like in that middle point of trying to figure it out. So I often say to people, like, I don't consider that and I know we both feel this way, we haven't figured it out. We don't know everything about everything, but I'm trying to toggle with that because I believe that the truth is in the middle. The truth isn't in the either or. I'd say that when we first met, I clearly said to Radhi who I was, what I wanted to do in the world, and what that meant for a relationship. And so when we met, I said, I want to serve the world. I don't know what that's going to look like, but I know that I'm going to choose that above a lot of other things that maybe the people we're around are going to choose over their purpose. And I said, I don't know what my purpose is yet, but I know that that's my commitment and that's what I want to work on. And I'd say I've pretty much stayed the same in that I've always felt that way, and that's accelerated and escalated and elevated, but I'm pretty much the same. But I think the amazing thing is that when we first met, so many people would have ideas for Radhi. So they'd come to me and be like, Radhi should start a restaurant, or Radhi should do this, or Radhi should do that. Because when we met, I was the ambitious one and driven one and focused one, and Radhi was the content one and satisfied one. And I realized that I loved her for being the way she was. Mm-hmm. And I wanted her to grow at her own pace, in her own time, if she wanted to. And then in the past couple of years, I've seen Radhi find herself and want to grow and put in the work and transform who she is. And that's wonderful to see too. And what I've realized in partnerships is that it's interesting. Often we want to be around people that are like us. But I always say to people, I would never want to date someone who's like me. In that I wouldn't want to find the female version of me and marry them. I want to find someone that is who they are and happy in their own skin. And Radhi's been happy with who she was then, and she's happy with who she is now. And that's what allows us to have that opportunity. And a lot of the credit to our relationship goes to her. When we were in New York, and my biggest priority in New York was setting her up.
Oh my gosh, she used to set me up on all these girl dates constantly.
Literally, I would try and find a list of girls in New York that I think she'd get along with. And then I'd DM them. And I'd be like, I think you and my wife would really get along. Like, you guys should hang out. Because I just felt so bad that she'd left her family because of me. And then now we were in New York. And I would be at work all day. I was at HuffPost at the time. And so I'd be at work from a 9 to 6 job and then come back in the evening. But then we might have a networking event. So much of my pressure on top of building my purpose was, is my wife happy? And I was just always conscious of that. And I just thought, if she's not happy, none of this matters. And so I was always trying to find ways of figuring that out. I think one of my first things in failure is don't take it more personally than it actually is. And I'll give an example of that. When I was applying to 40 companies that all rejected me before an interview, all I was getting was an automated response saying your application will not go any further. I can't take that personally because they didn't meet me in person. They didn't have a interaction with me. They just saw my name. They saw I'd been a monk for 3 years. That resume is useless. I mean, what's your transferable skills? Like sitting in silence and stillness. Surprise, surprise, no one wants to hire a monk. And so they rejected you, but that's not personal because they didn't meet me in person.
But what if they had meeting you in person?
Right, so that's the first step. The first step is don't take all failure. I'll give you an example. Me and you, we reach out to countless guests to be on our podcast.
Who say no all the time.
Who say no all the time. But if I don't hear a no from the guest directly, that's not a no. Like, someone's team can say no, someone's assistant can say no, someone's PR team can say no, but until they say no personally, it's not a no.
Okay, but when they do say no,
then that's a no. Yeah, so then let's move to that.
So how do you deal with that type of failure?
Yes, so if I deal with a failure where someone meets me in person and gets to know me.
No, Jay, you're horrible, you suck, like I don't want to deal with a monk ever in my life. I would never go on your show, I'm never listening to you, never. Then how do you deal with that type of failure?
So I've heard you say this, I've said it a couple of times and I'm sure it's been repeated a bunch of times around how I genuinely believe failure has feedback.
It's feedback,
and so for me, it's like failure has the ability to actually tell you what you need to improve. Now, not to improve to get their attention, improving to get the actions that you want to take.
The results you want.
The results you want. And don't make that result about the person who said no. Don't use failure as a way to prove someone else wrong.
Because what happens when we prove others wrong?
When you prove others wrong, you end up trying to get validation and approval for them. And now if they're not impressed when you're right, you lose again. So you end up losing twice.
And you spend all this time and energy, years maybe, to prove someone wrong. I've been there many times. And then you're like, I felt good for a moment. And then I feel empty again.
Totally. And so that's the thing about failure in the second half is you have to see failure as an improvement. If I'm completely honest, everyone who rejected me in my life up until now has made me more hungry, taught me so much more about myself, and made me up my game. And I think if failure doesn't make you up your game, it's the same as losing in a sport. Right? When you fail and you've lost games and you've won games you know, on the big stages.
You didn't have the skills, you didn't have the teamwork, you guys weren't hungry enough,
you
whatever
weren't communicating enough.
There's something you were missing. So you go review the game film, you check the stats, you see what could I have done better, and you try to improve that for the next game. And I think a lot of people can do that in life, but we're so afraid to like go on the next game of life. Like I got rejected once and it hurts so bad. how do people learn to overcome that pain of rejection? To keep going. You know, in sports, luckily there's a season, which is like you might have 30 basketball games. After you lose the first 2, you don't say, I'm just going to give up the rest of the season. You keep playing. But in life, a lot of people stop playing. Why?
I think that's great mental training too. I think sports is great mental training because you have to show up to the next game even if you lost and you don't feel bad. Like you don't feel good, And one of the things, before I dive into that question, one of the things that you reminded me of was the Last Dance documentary. So there's that season that Michael Jordan, everyone is in agreement that he is one of the best players to be playing. And they keep losing.
And they didn't make the finals.
Right? They didn't make the finals. They lost. And then they realized they need to get the team. And they need to find, I think they bring in Dennis Rodman. And then they start bringing in all these other players that strengthen. Whereas if they would have just said, we got the best player in the world, we just keep doing this, I'm not sure they would have got there, right? But the coach, Phil Jackson, and the team, they had to adapt. And so you're saying, why do we feel that pain in rejection and how do we deal with that? I think we feel that pain because we look at a failure, right? We look at it as a complete definition of us, right? We're looking at it as there's that famous statement of like, you know, failure is an event, not a person.
Right.
And I don't know who said it, but it's one of those statements that really clicks. Like failure is an event, not a person. Whereas we start thinking we are the failure. Like we say, I am a failure.
I always say it was hard to become a monk and it was even harder to leave because I didn't necessarily leave knowing my natural progression. I left because I realized that wasn't my path anymore. I came to the understanding and conclusion that I wasn't meant to be a monk, that didn't fit with my purpose and my calling, and externally at least. And then with the people that I lived with, they also felt that I could serve better and do more for the world if I moved on, but there was no clear pathway. And so when I moved back in with my parents, I had my 18,000 pounds of student loan debt to pay off. I moved back in with my parents, age 25 going on 26, because I didn't have any money to my name. And my resume had monk on it. So I applied to 40 corporate companies like the month I came back from living as a monk, or over a few months. And I was rejected by all 40 companies before an interview. Because surprise, surprise, no one wants someone with a monk on their resume, right? It's like, what's your transferable skills? Like staying silent or, you know, being mindful? Like who needs that? And so genuinely, it was so hard because I was sending off applications. And if anyone knows corporate applications, these are real in-depth analysis, research on the company. And they're not just, you know, flog your resume everywhere. And so all these companies are saying no to me, and I'm getting rejection letter after rejection letter. I'm worried that I can't depend on my parents because they're not well-to-do and well-off to supply for me for the rest of my life. And now it's like all the people that doubted me, it almost feels like they were real. So when I left to become a monk, people doubted me and they thought I was crazy or brainwashed or confused. And they said things like to me, you'll never get a job. You'll never make money again. No one's ever going to marry you. Like, you know, and so when I came back, it was almost like all of them were right. I wasn't getting a job again. So I wasn't making any money again. Like it was all true. And so my level of self-confidence and self-esteem in 2013 when I came back was not high at all. And then finally, Accenture gave me a job. So they were like literally that 41st company that I just about got. I got through to the interview, thankfully impressed whoever was there at the interview, and I got that job. And I was starting a job at age 26 that was a job for 21-year-olds. So I joined their graduate program. And so I was now 5 years older than every single person that was in my cohort.
When you protect your purpose protects you. Now, I want to unpack that. What I mean by that is your purpose is like a rare jewel and a rare gemstone. And imagine you were walking around with the most expensive diamond or jewel in the world. How would you protect it? You wouldn't just wear it on your chest. You'd protect it. And so your purpose is like that. And guess what? Wow. People are going to tell you every day that that jewel is not worth anything. They're going to tell you that that jewel is actually valueless. It doesn't have any impact on your life. They're going to try and take away that value. They're going to tell you that there's another jewel out there that you need to have more value. I love the word. Look at the wording. Protect your purpose. You have to protect it. So what happens is your success grows. you get more opportunities, more ideas, more things coming your way, temptations, but they can all take you away from your purpose. And to me, I'm repeating this for myself because I'm like, I just want to stick to what I was born to do. And I'm so grateful that I get to do it. I'm so happy I get to do it. And I want to keep protecting it. I don't want to get lost in the waves. You know, you don't want to just get chucked in the waves of the ocean and just get lost and just not know where you're going. So for me, when you protect your purpose protects you. Now, there is no relationship in the world where people don't argue. If a couple says they don't argue, it can mean one of two things. Either they're just getting to know each other or they're lying.
Are you calling me a liar?
I'm calling you one if you are one.
Managing conflict is one of the most important skills in any relationship. The one simple question that improves any relationship is, how will I feel in 1 year about this current conflict in my relationship? People feel more forgiving and interpret their relationship in a more positive light when looking at it from a future perspective. When couples and partners argue about finances, family, jealousy, or attention, or whatever it may be, in those situations, we use our current feelings as fuel for a heated argument.
Loud noises!
But with this simple shift, where we're envisioning our relationships from the future, we're actually able to mitigate conflicts and think of things with a bigger perspective and picture.
Everybody, calm down.
When we start thinking about things through the future, we use more long-term thinking. We start using our reasoning strategies, our more mature intelligence rather than our currently emotion-filled mind. How many times have you said something in the moment that you regret later? How many times have you made an impulse decision that you later recognize wasn't the right one?
A lot, actually.
When we employ future perspective thinking, we get the ability to rise above our current emotions and start thinking from a point of intelligence. When we do this, we blame our partners less. We take more responsibility about what we can change. We're more forgiving, and we're even more able to focus on why the conflict happened in the first place. How many times have you started an argument, let it continue for days, and even forgotten why it started?
I can't remember anything that happened before 2 weeks ago.
Next time you're in a conflict, an argument, or a debate with your partner, ask yourself this question. How will I feel in 1 year about this current conflict in my relationship? It will make a difference, and it will surely give you perspective. If you had 100 hours to invest in your self-development, in what you were good at, what you were average at, and what you were bad at, how would you split that time? When this question was asked to 200 of the most healthy, wealthy, wise people in the world, what they found is that their percentages were 100, 0, 0, or 80, 10, 10. And the reason for this was very simple. When we focus on things we're naturally good at, and we invest in them, we become exceptional at them. When we focus on things that we're average at, we may get good at them. And when we focus on things we're naturally bad at, we may become average at them. The hard skills that we have, the actual hard, tangible skills that we have, we should focus on our strengths. But when it comes to our qualities or emotional intelligence, we should focus on our weaknesses. So if you have a challenge with something like listening, you don't go, oh yeah, Jay told me not to focus on my weaknesses, so I'm not gonna bother getting better at my listening, right? Listening is a soft skill. If you have a weakness in a soft skill, you want to give that your energy. But if you have a strength in a hard skill, you want to give that your energy and focus. And usually we do it the other way around. If we're bad listeners but good at something else, we let it roll. We say, oh, that's okay, that's not a big deal. But when it comes to things like empathy, emotional intelligence, vulnerability, listening, communication, connection, these are things that we can improve in. And when it comes to our natural strengths, our skills, our hard skills, we can play to those as well. And when we play to our strengths, when we understand our role and our offering, and we recognize that actually that person has their offering, we recognize it's not that we disagree with each other, it's not that that person's trying to take me down, it's just that we speak different languages. We generally talk to people like they're exactly the same. And people generally talk to us like we're exactly the same. We usually expect that people will respond to things in the same way as we will. We just have this lens. Until we start recognizing that there are different wirings for different people, so they all respond to different things. And there's a beautiful statement that's often attributed to Albert Einstein where he said that everyone's a genius, but if you judge a fish by its ability to climb a tree, it will spend its whole life believing that it's stupid. And so many of us in our own life are either trying to be something or we're connecting with people differently. All of us can mindfully approach any conversation in the workplace, with a partner, potentially even with a patient or wherever it is, understanding that person's language. The point being that everyone was trying to achieve the same goal. And I want you to do that. I want you to give yourself the benefit of the doubt and the people around you that everyone is trying to work towards the same goal. If we can just learn to speak each other's language, then we'll be able to improve our communication. And our challenges arise by how we see ourselves. And what I believe Rangan's referring to is there's this quote that I begin my book with and that I've shared in interviews for the last few years. And it's from a writer named Charles Horton Cooley, who wrote this in the 1900s. And what he said is that, I think it's in the 1800s, at the end of the 1800s, towards the 1900s. And he said, and bear with me, and you've got to really listen closely to this. So what he said that the challenge today is, I'm not what I think I am. I'm not what you think I am. I am what I think you think I am. Now, just let that blow your mind for a moment. I will explain it, I promise. I'm not what I think I am. I'm not what you think I am. I am what I think you think I am, which means we live in a perception of ourselves. So I'll break it down. If I think Rangan thinks I'm smart, I'll say I feel smart. But if I think Rangan thinks I'm not smart, then I'll say I'm not smart. And so the challenge is that we're basing how we feel about ourselves on what we think someone thinks of us. And the greatest challenge with that is, how do you have any idea if what you think someone thinks about you is even true, and whether that's even the best place to start? So that's where our identity struggles. We start pursuing things in life because we think other people value them. It's almost like, let's think of the most playground version of this. If I remember wearing high-tech shoes from BHS to the playground, right? I remember my mom, because my parents didn't buy me Nike trainers or Adidas trainers, which I always wanted. You know, we didn't come from that background. I couldn't afford them, and my parents didn't want me to have them. So I'd walk in with my high-tech trainers from BHS. They were about 10 quid or whatever they were. and you know, to me, it didn't make a difference. I didn't really know at that time whether high-tech was good or bad. They were just trainers that my parents bought me. Now, everyone, the cool kid at school, had the latest Nike trainers. All of a sudden, I start thinking that he's now surrounded by everyone. Everyone's talking about his trainers. Everyone's giving him adoration. Everyone's giving him respect. Everyone's talking about his trainers. So now I think that if I want to have that same experience and love from people, that I need to get that. Not realizing that I may be able to get deeper love from people by being kind and compassionate. That I may actually be able to build a real relationship with people if I'm loving and considerate and empathetic. And it's so crazy how your life can become about pursuing something. And that's why Jim Carrey puts it best, and I'm paraphrasing. He says, you know, everyone in the world should achieve everything they've ever wanted and accomplish everything they've ever pursued, just to realize that it's not the point. Now, that doesn't mean the monk mindset is not about not pursuing your goals. It's actually about pursuing your truest goals, your truest self, and your most authentic, aligned goals. So it's not about not having goals. It's about making sure that your goals are actually yours. I was around 9 years old and I was visiting India with my family. We were stuck in traffic and we were driving through a slum area. It was the first time I'd seen homes built out of cardboard, scrap metal, and bricks all at the same time. Growing up in London, I'd never ever seen anything like it before, apart from on TV or in the movies. I saw some children on the streets, probably around the same age as me, but very different. Some of them didn't have clothes, they looked undernourished, and they probably didn't have access to much water. I could tell by the dryness on their lips and their skin. I noticed this one young girl who had her head inside a trash can. It looked like she was scrambling for something. When she finally came out and looked at me, she smiled. Not knowing what to do, I smiled back. She was obviously trying to look for food, and I could see her scrambling and trying to reach in as far as she could. Only then did I realize that she only had arms. She didn't even have hands. As she looked at me, I could tell she was hungry. But by the time I was just about to do something, our car took off, and I could only see her now and feel her disappointment that I wasn't able to help. At the time, I didn't have any food or money, and before I could ask my parents or the driver to stop, we were too far along on the highway, but I couldn't stop thinking about her. When we got back to the hotel, I got out of the car, and it was lunchtime. And even though I was really hungry, I couldn't eat because I couldn't get over the fact that I couldn't have done anything for that young girl that I just saw. Even though I went to the buffet with my parents, it felt as if only me and her had looked at each other in that whole exchange and the whole city had stopped. I could remember exactly how she looked as I was looking at the food. When we were there at the buffet, I overheard a couple arguing with the hotel staff. Listening into their conversation, I found out that the couple were really upset at the hotel staff because of the number of choices available in the buffet. I looked around. There were so many options. They were complaining about there not being enough choice, but all I could see was choice. There were at least 30 items just as starters available to everyone there, but it wasn't enough for them. Now I get that everyone has their own standards, has their own expectations in life, and we're allowed to have them. And I know that everyone is fighting their own battle, but that little girl, she didn't even have hands. She was scraping with whatever was left of her arms. But many years on from that event now, I've learned a lot. One of the things is that I can sit here and be angry at that couple who was complaining, or I could actually do something about it. It reminded me of a quote by Gandhi. He said that I was sad because I didn't have any shoes, and then I saw a man with no feet. For me, this event left a lasting impression in my heart and two messages that I want to share with you today. The first one is to remain grateful for absolutely anything we have. Robin Roberts said it perfectly. She said that if we threw all our problems into our pile, we would rush to grab our own back. And when we start with gratitude and see everything as fortune and grace, we're able to receive much more deeply. And number two, let's help those who need it. Let's not be mad that the world isn't helping them. Let's see what we can do. Compassion is key and empathy is essential. And that's one of the reasons that I focus so much of my life in trying to help those in need. And it may mean that you're in a space in your life where you feel you can't currently help anyone right now, but I guarantee you that there's just one person out on the street today that you could impact, that you could change their experience at least for a moment. Remember what Gandhi said. I was sad because I didn't have any shoes, and then I saw a man with no feet. It puts everything into perspective. When I think back to all the biggest changes that I made or biggest progress that we've made, it all came from lots of small things. So at one point I remember sending an email every day to someone who I wanted to offer me a job. And I think about that getting the job was a big thing, but it came down to 30 emails. And those 30 emails came down to 30 moments. And those 30 moments came down to one intention, to want to live my purpose. And so you could say a really big thing happened based on a ton of really small things. And I think that's what's interesting, that it's always a collection of small things that lead to a big win, as opposed to one small thing or one big thing. Most of us are scared of trying because we're scared of a bad result. We're scared of rejection. We're scared of a negative outcome. And that often stops us from starting. I realized that if I get addicted to the process, if I get addicted to figuring out how I can pivot, how can I adapt, allowing myself to make mistakes, but constantly trying to tweak my approach and my methodology, then I'm convinced that I'll figure out how to get to the right outcome. So if the result isn't what I wanted, I go back to the process and I start adapting and messing around with the process. But if your focus always shifts back to the methodology and the approach, then you'll never go wrong, in my opinion.
I think that people who've found their purpose are better partners, better parents, better professionals, better people. And so if everyone in the world was deeply aligned and connected to their purpose, the world would be a beautiful place. And I think any pain we see in the world comes from a disconnect with purpose. There's a beautiful thought from Russell Barkley where he said that the people who need the most love often ask for it in the most unloving ways. So we confuse love with power. Yeah. We confuse love with control. We confuse love with validation and being liked. And to me, love comes from living our purpose, self-love and true love with other people. We all have what's called the monk mind and the monkey mind. And as monks, we were trained to look at the parts of our minds that we make mistakes, that fail, that do things wrong as the monkey mind. And immediately when you think of your mind like a monkey, you just end up laughing. You're just like, that's just the silliest thing. And so now when you start seeing yourself do things that are out of character or out of alignment or things that you don't feel proud of, instead of judging yourself and criticizing yourself, you're approaching it going, well, that's just the monkey mind. Let me understand that as separate of me. That is not me. That is a habit that I've taken on. That is a group of people that I've spent too much time with. It's an idea that I've absorbed. If you can look at these things as separate to who you are, you can now actually tackle them versus when you think you are them, it just leads to guilt, judgment, self-criticism, and self-sabotage, which I'm sure a lot of us are privy to, that we go through this period where we're like, I can't believe I did that. I shouldn't have said that. I just wish I didn't say that in that moment. And that doesn't change your behavior. It doesn't switch how you feel. It just creates more regret. Yeah. But when you go, wait a minute, that's just the monkey mind. I've got that condition. I've associated with that type of environment and energy. Let me approach it as something that is separate of me. Creating that distance and space from our challenges lets us actually start solving them.
When you were talking about the stories we tell ourselves, I think that's so important because there's a great study that I talk about in the book by Amy Wrzniewski from the Yale University. And what they found is that they tried to find a career that they felt people may find not sharing a positive story around. And they found that hospital cleaners or hospital workers potentially have one of the toughest jobs. And Rangan, you're a doctor, and I'm sure you've seen people having to do that work, and it's a tough job. And so they asked hospital workers how they defined their jobs. And the majority of them defined it as low skilled, defined it as, insignificant, defined it as just a way to pay the bills, and that their job wasn't useful or their job wasn't important. And their role was basically described like the personnel manual. But then they asked another set of hospital workers, the same people who did the same jobs, different people who did the same jobs, and they said, how do you feel about your jobs? And these people had completely different views. They felt they were healers. They felt they were caretakers. They felt that they were able to transform the energy of the actual hospital. They felt that they were carers for the people there. And what they found is that these same people, different people who did the same job were telling themselves a different story, and therefore they saw their role as integral to the healing of the patient. And because they saw their role as integral to the healing of the patient, they found the work that they did to be extremely meaningful. And that's crazy to think about it, that different people doing the same job could say different things about the same work. They're doing the same exact thing daily, but someone thinks it's meaningless and the other thinks it's so meaningful. And this was a term by Yale that was called job crafting. The ability to assign meaning where you see it, and all of a sudden your life becomes meaningful. So if you're sitting in a job right now that you hate, or if you've got a boss that you really don't like, or if you're in a relationship that you don't want to be in, if you can't leave for whatever reason right now because of COVID or lockdown or whatever it is, financial difficulties, if you can't leave and you really want to, one of the things I recommend you do is called job crafting from the Yale School of Management. That you start asking yourself, where can I find meaning in this? What can I learn? What can I adopt? What is this trying to teach me? And that's actually where gratitude can be applied to every place, because you start going, there is some value in this. I remember when I wanted to leave my corporate job and I wanted to live my passion and do what I do today. But I'm so grateful I was at my corporate job because I learned so much there that is so useful to me now. And we find it very easy to be grateful when things are going our way, but we find it very difficult to be grateful when things are not going our way. But what we have to learn to realize, which is a really hard lesson to realize, is that things are always going your way if you're moving in the right direction. Things are not going to always look like they're going your way, and they could still be going your way. We've all seen curses turn into gifts and gifts turn into curses. But the problem is, and this is the challenge, we have a projector up here of what we want life to look like. And then we have the reality of what life actually looks like. So there's this big discrepancy. And so sometimes you're actually going in the right direction, but because it doesn't look like your picture and your image of what it should look like, you work less, you become lazier, you become complacent, you try less harder because you're like, this doesn't look like the right direction. But you'll get to where you want in life, just not in the way you imagined it, if you keep going, if you keep pushing, if you keep learning. And that's what it means to be grateful in all areas of your life, is trying to, even in the toughest moment, even in a challenging situation, not gratitude like, oh, I'm so thankful to you for causing me the pain. That's not what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about is saying to yourself, where is there meaning in this? Where is the lesson in this so I don't repeat this again? If I can be grateful in this challenging situation and I can experience gratitude at all times, then I'm always going to be coming at things from a positive space and positive energy.
Because you made it this far in a video, I want to celebrate you. Most people start and don't finish. Most people never actually follow through. Most people say they want something, but they don't ever do the work to actually get it. But you are different. You are special. Believe Nation, you made it here all the way to the end, and I love you. So as a special celebration, if you put a hashtag believe down in the comments below on this video, I will showcase you and celebrate you somewhere on the screen in a future video because you are awesome.
For 10 more amazing rules from Guru Gopal Das, check the video right there next to me. I think you'll love it. Continue to believe. I'll see you there.
The pathetic state of the world that we are in today, however, is because, like Mahatma Gandhi said, there is enough in the world for everybody's need